Agreement for deed. This is something that would be kind of subject to light. There may be a small mortgage on the property or no mortgage on the property, and you just do an agreement for deed. Sometimes they do an agreement for deed in lieu of foreclosure, where the bank or another entity will take over that property in lieu of foreclosure. Down payment and periodic payments are made at an interval to pay off the balance. This is when maybe a shorter term mortgage is in place. Maybe someone has just passed away. Maybe there's a sickness. Maybe the owner is older and has got a very little mortgage on it. You might do an agreement for deed. It's almost sometimes called a contract for deed or land contract. This is when it kind of acts along the lines of a lease option, almost a lighter version of that. A land contract is when you make periodic payments, and after a certain number of payments, 12, 24, 36, 48, whatever, that an ownership is triggered. And that ownership could come in many different fashions. The ownership could come by a traditional sale. An ownership could come by that owner quitclaim deeding you a percentage, if not all, of that property. Okay, agreement for deed, or something like that. But it's got a certain number of payments would have had to been made for that. Benefits to the seller. The seller can earn interest, so along that time frame, you can actually be paying interest on those payments, so the seller can actually earn more money. The seller can sell at a higher price because there's an easier entry to ownership on that property for you when you do a land contract, so you can establish a higher price at ownership or at when you do the agreement for deed. There's no appraisal. That doesn't mean you're not forced to do one. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do one. That just means you don't have to do one. Okay? I do recommend anytime you do a real estate transaction to have a professional appraise that. At least do a CMA. If you want to go a little bit more, do a BPO. CMA, comparative market analysis. BPO, broker price opinion. It's like a CMA on steroids. An appraisal is like a BPO on steroids. Right? Okay. And maybe if it's a scenario where the house is going to get foreclosed upon or put through probate or something like that, you can avoid those situations with an agreement for deed as well. A lot of times banks will use this when they're going through foreclosure. You probably saw in the news that Bank of America is starting to use this a lot, where they'll do an agreement for deed, or sometimes it's called deed in lieu of foreclosure, where they'll say, listen, we'll do a deed in lieu of foreclosure and we will rent or lease the house back to you. And we'll do that program for a couple years. Maybe we can establish this back where you can actually own the property again down the road, but some things will have to, parameters will have to be met. Okay? The next one is, benefits to the buyer. I missed that. There's no qualifying for the loan, because you got that because there's very little loan on the property now, and that seller is going to act as your lender. You do have an interest deduction on your taxes for the interest payments made, just like you would to a bank. And again, there's no appraisal or lending costs, so it lowers your closing costs that would happen on that deal. Okay, seller financing, and this is where I want to wrap up. Oh, I'm going to talk about this in a mortgage wrap. Let me see if this is next. Hold on. Yes. I'm going to talk about this in the mortgage wrap, and then we're going to be done for this segment, and I'm going to introduce, we'll take a little break, and then I'll introduce someone that you know by the name of Steve Martell. Right? Steve's out there, Rod?
Yes, he is.
Okay. You can queue him up by, say, 25 minutes, half hour, something like that. Cool. So, seller carryback. I have probably used this technique more in my career than any of the others. This technique allowed me to do quite a bit in my career. I'm going to tell you a story on a property that I bought. I bought a property in Lafayette, Indiana. Anybody know where Lafayette, Indiana is? Or anybody been there? It's where Purdue University is. West Lafayette, but right there. It's a town of about, I don't know, maybe 125,000 people, okay? It was one of my larger purchases. It was a $3,150,000 deal. I went to the owner. By the way, this was an owner that had very deep pockets, so to speak. Very well-to-do. This guy was involved in building golf courses and owning golf courses. He had done very large developments, big skyscrapers, office buildings. We're talking like $700 million guy, right? Again, not enough money to live on, but a good start. So I find it so interesting in my career as I've worked myself up and I started dealing with these people. This was a 90-unit complex, and I bought it for $3,150,000. My offer to that seller the first time was rejected. And typically when I put in offers that get rejected on apartment buildings, I will automatically wait, some time, 4 months, 6 months, and then I'll go back and revisit it. This one was no different. I think I waited a little less than that, however. It was about 2.5 months. And so I went back after my offer was rejected. I visited it again in 10 weeks. And sure enough, the property is still for sale. And I went back at my offer price that I offered before, but I asked for one thing extra. Anybody remember the show Columbo? You remember that show? Remember how he used to go, oh, and there is just one more thing. Remember that? It's kind of what happened with this deal. I went in at $3.1 million, and I asked the seller, $700 million guy, to carry back 10%. So I went in as, if I switch the screen here, I went in as this deal as an 80, 10, 10. 80% bank financing, 10% seller financing, 10% down payment. Now, what's interesting about this is as I started to get larger in my investment career, I went to a banker that I used before. And bankers are much like real estate agents. When you show them you perform, they give you better terms and better service. So even though it was a little difficult in getting the 80-10-10 agreed upon, I was able to do it. And in my mind, I knew that I was going to turn this property from $3.15 million into 5.4. I knew exactly how I was going to do that. So the seller agreed to give me the seller financing. So let's just figure this out. Raphael, if you could for me. 80% of 3.15 million is how much?
$2,520,000.
2,520,000. 10% is 315,000. You still with me, Raphael? Am I going too fast for you here? Is 315,000 as far as my down payment, right? My seller financing, right? And my bank financing. Now, one of the things I'm going to show you guys in the morning is how in this deal is what I just did for Steve is I turned my $315,000 down payment into $65,000. I absolutely did that. And I'm going to show you how I did that tomorrow morning. I will send you with this message, though, tonight. Is $700 million guy? me, little puny investor, sitting at a conference table with his attorney, him, his right-hand guy, and me on the other end of the conference table with the title agent in between. He's looking at the closing statement as I had to come to closing with $65,000, $70,000 for a $3.15 million property. He's pounding his fist on the conference table, pointing to me, saying, "How did you do this? How did you do this?" Me? I know how to play dumb, man. Woo! How did you do this? $700 million guy. I'm on the other end of the table. How did you do this? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know, really. I don't know why. What's the matter? I'm gonna share that with you tomorrow. We did that with Steve's property. It took his down payment from, I think, $540. Psychology tells us that sellers are motivated by price. Buyers should be motivated by terms. I'll spell this out for you in the morning. We'll work the math so you can see it, okay? Sellers are motivated by price. Buyers are motivated by terms. Remember that. That is going to be powerful for you to use tomorrow. The one question that we have from the audience is...
I'm curious as to... This is obviously a gangbusters type of strategy. I like it. I love it, actually. But what is the percentage of people that you actually bring this strategy to seller finance that don't really understand it? Because as soon as I bring it up, I know it's no.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I can have the right criteria, the right strategy, not the right strategy, but the right words in order to...
Yes, young grasshopper. With seller financing, the mistake that people make is they ask for it without explaining it. Number two, the second mistake that people make with seller financing is they ask for it without giving something in return. When you ask, you have to give. And most people ask and they don't give. So, tomorrow morning, the first thing I'm going to share with you is that process of asking and giving. The transaction should be one that they don't even know that they've missed out on anything. But they will, trust me. Right? They're going to be like, "Oh, thank you for that. Thank you very much. Oh, you're so welcome." Like when I did the deal with the $700 million guy. He got the contract and I gave him his asking price of $3.15 million. This little guy, this little investor gave us our asking price. He probably can't even close this deal. How did you do this? How did you do this? Oh my gosh. So that's what I'm going to start out with tomorrow. I want to finish this today by talking about the wrap. Mortgage wraps. And I'll share what this is with you. We are probably, let me check my time here. My time's what? Unbelievable? 5:25. I thought you said unbelievable. See how my mind works?
No.
I thought you said my timing's unbelievable. Didn't you say that, Jerry?
No.
I think you said that, didn't you?
No.
You sure did say that. 5:25 in other languages on the world means unbelievable.
You're mistaken.
Thank you.
Don't
Yeah.
forget your trick.
Yes. Yes. I will perform magic for you, and I'll do it while Steve's here. That's how I'm going to kick off the next thing. But, so I need like, we'll take a little break after this next thing, like 15 minutes. I'll set it up, and then Steve will come up and make his announcement. You don't want to miss that. You don't want to miss that. Wraps. Here's what it is. A mortgage that includes the remaining balance on an existing first mortgage plus an additional amount requested by the mortgagor. Third-party intermediary, title company or loan servicing company. You just saw a closing on this that Stephanie did up here. So let me switch the screen. Does everybody have that definition? Okay. You guys are cranky. So, everybody have it now? What about now? Smarty, you got it now? Steve. Penny, do we just want to make more noise, or what are we doing here? What do we got going? This is a noise factory? That's what happens, I guess, when Marco's not here to watch her. Okay, you got it, Steve? Not yet? A mortgage that includes the remaining balance on an existing first mortgage plus an additional amount requested by the mortgagor. You got it now? No? You're not recording what I'm saying right now? You're not taking a picture of the screen with your iPad or your iPhone?
It doesn't work with my phone.
Oh, really? Sounds like an excuse to me. Okay, so I'll put this back, I promise you, Steve. So what happens is, let's say that we've got a property that's $100,000. And the person that owns it has a mortgage that is in first position of $50,000 with ABC Bank. Okay? ABC Bank. You go in and do a deal and say, listen, I'll buy your property for $100,000. I'll give you your selling price. But, let's just say that the seller says, hey, I got a prepayment penalty on my loan. I don't want to pay it off, but I'll sell you the property. But I want 100 grand. Okay, I'll give you your 100 grand. But I want you to carry a mortgage for me of $85,000. I'll give you 15 at closing. You go to the closing, you give the 15 to the seller, so he's got $15,000 in cash, right? And now there's a second mortgage in place of $85,000 with the seller. Now, notice, sorry, this is an 8. This is exactly what we did on Steve's deal. It was a wraparound mortgage. When I first got the deal, there was a little bit of confusion because there was a lot of activity and a lot going on. And I'm reading it, and I'm reading it, and I'm like, Steve, this is a wraparound mortgage. And this is how we need to approach that. Loan servicer, blah, blah, blah. You know, that's why the loan service is in place today. Even though the $85,000 mortgage to the seller is more than the first mortgage of $50,000 with ABC Bank, the $85,000 is in second position. If that $50,000 mortgage is not paid, they have the right to foreclose on the property. Guess what? When they sell that property at auction or foreclosure auction that many of you have been to on the bus trips, the last one we were at was in Austin. Right, Tommy? Very good? Okay. The $50,000 mortgage gets their money first. If the property sells at $65,000 at auction, $50,000 of it goes to the first mortgage, $15,000 of it goes to the seller, and that's it. Does everybody see that? Unless the seller goes there and pays that $50,000. So even though the second mortgage is greater, it's in second position. That's called a wraparound mortgage. Now, this too could trigger that idea of a due on sale clause. We will talk about that tomorrow in detail. But I kind of wanted you to be aware of what a wraparound mortgage was. Okay? Are we all good with these things? I'm going to talk more in the morning about seller financing, how you can use that. So this one, by the way, is if you have a little bit of money to spend. Not a lot, but a little bit of money to spend. And of course, again, you have to make sure all the numbers work. Cash return on investment, debt service coverage ratio, all of these things. You still have to work those numbers. But these are all ways that you can get in creatively to a property with very little money or no money down, or create your own down payment. In Chicago, I'm going to show you how to create your own down payment with multifamily units. Absolutely, positively, I will show you how to create that. And you can create that into a business, by the way. I'm going to show you separately how to even create a separate business on how to do that. You don't want to miss Chicago. Number one, it's the best city in the country. Some of the most beautiful people come from there. Thank you.